علي صوتك مع صوت ياهلا.
This is Nesreen Ballut from Yahala Voice with an exclusive coverage on the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee controversy. You can listen to us at www.yahalavoice.com. As some may know, leading roles in the ADC, such as a former President Warren David, who had been a member of ADC since 1980, and former National Communications Director Ra'ed Jarrar, have been fired from the committee. This all erupted after they expressed concerns over the civil rights group's handling of the sexual harassment allegations against former head of ADC's Michigan branch, Imad Hamad. Here to tell us more about the matter, we have former Communications Director Ra'ed Jarrar. Ra'ed, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Ra'ed, could you shed light on what is currently occurring within ADC for some that do not know?
This is the most recent controversy that has been mishandled by the ADC board. There are a lot of details, but I think your listeners will be surprised to know that in the last 6 weeks, 11 people from the 11 members of the ADC team have been either terminated or laid off or pushed to resign. This is a small organization, we have a staff of 13 maybe or 14. And when 11 people are fired and terminated and laid off and pushed to resign because they spoke out against what they perceive to be a cover-up regarding the sexual harassment scandal. I think this is an enough indicator that something really wrong is going with the organization.
Now, what was ADC's reasoning behind firing those individuals? Did they give out a reason?
So there were different excuses given. Like, for example, when ADC laid me off, the reason that they gave initially was that they were going restructuring, organizational restructuring. And then after that, an advisory board member in Michigan made a public statement about me being fired because I was an insubordinate employee who looked into a sexual harassment investigation. That I should not have done that, and he claimed that I have, I should have obedience to my organization. I don't know where he gets his information from, but this is not how U.S. laws work. There is no duty of obedience. There is, unless you're slaves, I guess. There is, duty to obey the laws, and of course, we all have the duty to obey our moral obligations. After that, they had other excuses given by ADC national board member in a public statement. He also claimed that I did not follow organizational policies or something like that. So they keep on changing their story about me.
Okay.
I know that with Warren David, the president, that their excuse was that he did not follow orders.
Now, having the president, Warren David, because he's the president, he holds this role that everyone is attracted to. Everyone is shocked to hear that the president of ADC is fired.
Correct.
So now, what made you or Warren stand up to say something about this sexual harassment matter?
It wasn't just me, and I was engaged in collective action with every staff member of the organization, all non-management staff, including myself, sent multiple letters of concern to the management of the organization and to the board of the organization. And, we were very polite and very subtle in our questions. We said, something to the effect of, we are employees of this organization, and we would like to express concern that, we're kept in the dark. We have no information about what's going on towards the beginning of the scandal. After that, we asked more questions because we perceived, there were some issues that were happening inside the organization that gave us all a feeling that there is something wrong going on with the investigation. Mm-hmm. So we asked questions about whether the investigation is being done in good faith or not.
Okay.
Very, very regular questions. And now, the culture at the leadership of ADC, unfortunately, it's a culture that can't deal with employees, such as myself and my coworkers, asking questions and questioning what they perceive to be something wrong. So we were threatened to be fired by the chairman of ADC. Earlier in the year.
Just because you guys were inquiring about what was going on?
Just because we asked questions. Okay. The thing that we were told indirectly, through messages that he sent through the president, is that, if we don't like the investigation, if we don't trust it, we should leave, find another place. Mm-hmm. And he told the president of the organization that if we continue to ask questions, that he should fire us. Mm-hmm. And if he doesn't fire us, the chairman will come and fire us, by himself. So we heard those threats, but, to tell you the truth, from my perspective and the perspective of my coworkers, that this was not an issue that we will be threatened on. We will not work with an organization that does not respect its employees. Mm-hmm. And does not answer basic questions to prove that a manager that has been accused of sexual harassment since 1999 has been kept on staff for a good reason.
Okay.
These are very, very fair questions. We felt that if these questions were not answered, we're not going to be intimidated and scared, because that's not why we joined ADC.
Definitely.
We did not join ADC to be intimidated into silence, just to get a paycheck.
Now, Raed, also, it's been reported that 4 women employed in the national office of ADC stopped working in protest after you specifically were removed. So how did ADC respond to those resignations? Aside from individuals being fired, there are individuals that actually resigned.
Correct. There were a bunch of employees who resigned, actually. As you mentioned, my 4 co-workers who engaged with me in collective action to ask questions, they all went on strike the day after ADC laid me off. Because they saw my layoff as, not only a retaliation against me, but also a retaliation against them and a threat against them. But if they open their mouths, they will be next. So they went on strike, and they tried to negotiate with the national board of ADC a way for all of us to go back and end the crisis before it becomes a scandal. Unfortunately, the board was not responsive and did not meet their conditions. So they ended up resigning after a few weeks of going on strike. Okay. Other people resigned as well, including a consultant that we had, all of the organization's interns, and another legal fellow that was with the organization. So in total, when you count Warren David and Amal David, 11 people have been either pushed out or fired. Now, I just want to mention one thing,
sure.
Just to keep in mind that for these women to resign, I felt so much hope in the Arab American community when I saw what my co-workers did. Because unlike, what happened to me or to Warren, where we were fired and terminated, mm-hmm. These women had the choice to stay with the organization. And they took a principled stand and resigned and sacrificed a paycheck at the end of the month. Just to show you that we have people in the community who will put their principles first, even if their principles will end up, leading to them resigning and not getting a paycheck at the end of the month.
Yes.
So I'm saying, like, in the middle of all of this crisis, although I'm feeling very disappointed by the mismanagement of the board and the culture at the top of the organization, I'm extremely proud of how the staff of ADC have acted and carried themselves.
Definitely. Now, I know that ADC, aside from the individuals that are branching off and taking a stance against ADC, ADC has many supporters that are still supporting ADC's cause and the chairman within ADC. So how have they reacted after the allegations went viral? I mean, is ADC doing anything to calm down the chaos?
That's a good question to ask who's left at ADC. We all care about ADC, and we are all involved with the organization. I've been a member of ADC for a while, and I was on the advisory board, the president's advisory board, before I joined the organization. So obviously I care about the organization more than just a day job, and all of my coworkers are very involved with the organization. So we don't really see the mismanagement of the leadership of this organization. People who have been running the organization for decades. We don't see them necessarily as ADC. We are ADC as well.
Okay.
And the organization belongs to all of us. I'm very saddened at this crisis, and I know that, as you mentioned, many people are turning against the organization as a whole, and this is causing like a very large controversy, and this makes me feel sad because I would have loved for ADC to be the strong Arab American organization that we all need to protect us. We need an ADC to be there to protect Arab Americans from the daily attacks that we endure. We don't need ADC to turn into another liability for the community, another problem, another stain on the community's reputation. But this is what's going on now, is that because of the actions of the current leadership, ADC has turned into another problem that we have to deal with. And that's why many people, including myself, don't think that the organization can move forward without this board resigning. We need to move on. We need a new leadership. And these community leaders who have been involved with ADC for decades, some of them for 33 years, I think it's time for them to move on. Let younger Arab Americans get involved. Let new blood come into the organization and clean up this culture of corruption that has been growing on the top of the pyramid.
Now, Ra'ed, also something that's just surfacing and being reported on is that back in 2007, Ahmad was reprimanded and ordered to undergo a training course on sexual harassment guidelines. I mean, this is something that's mind-boggling and something that everyone's concerned with. I mean, why? The main question everyone's asking is, why did ADC keep quiet back in 2007?
Thank you. And this is exactly the questions that we asked. Now, the more we learned, the more disgusted we were with the situation, because apparently this entire sexual harassment allegations go back to 1999. And there was an investigation that was conducted by ADC in 2007, where many women, according to even sexual harassment victims who I met with, there were, I think, 6 or 7 women who were interviewed by ADC at that time. And it seems that there was a recommendation by the ADC legal department at the time to terminate the manager in question. But then the ADC leadership decided to keep him on staff for other considerations. Now, we asked questions because all of what I told you now, it's like pulling teeth. Like we learned everything either from the news or from the word on the street or someone leaking a document here and there. The culture of the leadership in ADC does not believe in transparency, not even with paid staff. So none of what I told you now was made public by the ADC leadership. And I think the fact that all of these allegations came to the surface and the ADC leadership knew about it since 2007 at least, and they decided to keep the manager in question on staff for all of this time, is a scandal by itself. This isn't limited to one manager who has been sexually harassing and assaulting women. This is a scandal about how the ADC board of directors managed that, because it's not just about the person who was involved in the act, but it's about who was covering up and keeping that manager on staff.
Now, you mentioned that there are other considerations why Imad might have been kept on ADC's committee. Now, what other considerations would there be?
This is a really good question. I really I encourage all of your listeners to go to a new website that was created by a number of Arab American activists. It's reformadc.org. If they go to reformadc.org, there are some historic information and facts and documents, but there is a form that they can fill and contact all ADC board members through the website. This is the only way you can contact board members, because their contact information is not on the actual ADC.org website. But if you go to reformadc.org, you can send an email to all of the board members. This is a good question to ask them. Ask them, why did they keep the manager in question on staff for all of this time? Now, I have heard allegations that the manager and staff, in question, that he managed to get $1 million or $1.5 million donations from some, Arab government in that year, and they were waiting for the funds. I've heard allegations that he was building some building. There are allegations right and left.
With those allegations, though, when someone mentions anything about monetary value, when it comes to someone that has an allegation of sexual harassment against him, it makes individuals in the community or supporters of ADC concerned where their money is going, actually. It's not...
Correct. I mean, it's not only that, actually. It makes me feel even more concerned, because when at a stage when I thought, the leadership of ADC kept the manager in question on staff because of lack of evidence, I thought this sounds fair. Maybe they didn't have enough evidence. Maybe like I gave them the benefit of the doubt. But when I came to realize that the reason might have been different, that they actually did not have doubt that the manager in question was engaged in misconduct, but they kept him on staff for other considerations. Yes. That made me feel more angry, because that shows you a culture of corruption and disrespect to women, that someone would keep a manager on staff because he will bring more money, regardless if he will engage with more acts of harassment against women. That's an indication that something really, really wrong is going on. And that's why I think, I really encourage your audience to go to reformadc.org and ask these questions. We can't, build all of our information on allegations and rumors and unconfirmed information. And I think as ADC members and former members, we deserve answers to these real questions, not just fluff about we're moving forward and we're, doing this and that without, being held accountable to one of the most critical and damaging scandals in the history of the organization. People have to be held accountable and answer real questions, such as, why did you keep the manager in question on staff? Why did you fire and push out 11 members of the ADC team in the last 6 weeks. These are very hard questions that can't be, they can't just, talk themselves out by giving fake promises. They have to actually answer with facts.
Now, Ra'ed, also, it's not only reported that Imad Hamad has these allegations against him, but it's also reported that ADC rewarded him and allowed him to retire instead of firing him or making it public that he has these said allegations against him.
Correct. So, this is something that, just shows you the contrast. So, at the time that myself, I started working with ADC 9 months. 9 months before I was laid off, and I started in February. And like many other people who get involved with the organization, I was underpaid and overworked, and I loved it because I did believe in doing something for our community. I felt that the Arab American community deserves, that we should work very hard to fight for our civil rights. I think maybe you and some of your listeners know about my case with the airline in 2006 when I was prevented from boarding on a flight because I had a T-shirt that had Arabic writing on it. Oh. And I fought that case for 3 years. The ACLU represented me at that time. So I got more engaged in Arab American civil rights, and I thought it's really important for me to work on this. Each member of ADC on staff had a personal story why they got engaged. They were either attacked or they witnessed an attack against Arab Americans. We all had conviction, we all had beliefs that we have to sacrifice for our community. Now, all of us were pushed out of the organization in a humiliating way. I was laid off on Friday at 4:40 p.m. I was told that I was terminated immediately. I put my things in a box and left, as if I was a criminal. I was as if I was like made a big mistake, or I was an enemy of the community or ADC. My other coworkers who ended up going on strike and resigning, that was a very hard exit for them. It was not an easy way to get out of the organization. They're all young in the beginning of their careers, and they're going through a very hard time finding other jobs and making ends meet just to pay their bills at the end of the month. And Warren David was fired in this humiliating way. The same thing, like they went and fired in the same day. All of this happens, and as you mentioned, the manager who was accused of sexually harassing women, ADC sends a long email thanking him for his services and announcing that he has retired, meaning that ADC will continue to give him financial payments, for God knows how long. So, just see the contrast there, what type of culture does this organization, is this organization trying to breed? When people speak up and try to fight for civil rights, speak up and try to fight for what they believe to be a principled stand, they are humiliated and terminated. But others, unfortunately, are rewarded by either keeping them on staff or allowing them to retire and stay on ADC's nickel. So all of these things are extremely important, examples of mismanagement of this leadership. These are extremely important examples for why the current ADC management has to go. This organization and the Arab American community deserve better. We deserve better than this corrupt, management, corrupt leadership of an organization that is supposed to be protecting us.
Now, Ra'ed, I know it's been said that former ADC President Warren David is pressing charges in a civil lawsuit against ADC. Have you taken that into consideration in your situation?
I have filed complaints against ADC already. Okay. I have filed 2 complaints against ADC. One with the NLRB because I was engaged in concerted activity with my coworkers, and the other with the EEOC. And I know that there are investigations against ADC and from both organizations. I am considering a lawsuit as well. I've not made up my mind yet. But I think I have heard as well that Warren is considering a lawsuit. And I have heard that a group of ADC members, I think 50 or 60 members, are considering another lawsuit against the organization as members. They want to audit the organization and go back and see all of the violations that were committed against the ADC bylaws, all of the corruption that has been going on with this organization. Because keep in mind, all of what I told you in the last 25 minutes about the sexual harassment scandal, this is one example. This is the tip of the iceberg of how much financial and moral corruption has been hiding at the top of the organization. And now it's all exposed because of this sexual harassment scandal. But I think there are many other questions to be asked that goes beyond sexual harassment. Things that have to do with the organization's policies and connections and funding sources, etc. So there are many other questions, I think.
Any third party that would look at the situation at an outside view would think that maybe they're trying to do a wiping out of individuals that are working with an ADC. And that's what it seems like. It seems like they are trying to wipe out many employees that are working within ADC, possibly to have new people work for ADC or personal reasons. I mean, that's really what it seems like.
I mean, I as well, I thought that there is a plan behind all of this management, but it seems that there is no plan. It's just mismanagement. I don't think they have other people in mind. I mean, just to give you an example, I was laid off in a week that the Alex Saud case. Alex Saud is an Arab-American civil rights leader who was assassinated 28 years ago in California. He was a member of ADC and a staff member of ADC. And his assassins flew to California, flew to Israel the day after the assassination. ADC has been, working on the case on and off for a few decades. When I came on board, I worked on the case, and we were on the peak. We're on the height of pushing, like a big push, national push, with the NAACP, with 5 other national organizations, when they laid me off. That campaign seems to have stopped. There was no transitional, plan for moving that effort forward. Or, I mean, an easier example, I invite all of your listeners and yourself to visit the website of ADC, adc.org. I was laid off on August 18th. The website has not been updated properly since, October 18th. Since October 18th. So it's been over 2 months. Advertisements for events that happened in October are still on the front page. The weekly digest has not been published. The organization stopped. The website is dysfunctional. So I'm saying that I think other people brought it up. They asked me, do you think there is like an alternative plan? Or, I mean, it doesn't seem like it. It just seems that they have no idea what they're doing.
Okay.
It's just a big mess, a big mismanagement. And people who are responsible of this mismanagement must be held accountable.
Now, Raed, I know that you mentioned events. Now, with regards to the events, I know the gala has been canceled, and there have been diverse thoughts of why the gala has been canceled. I know that there was a formal statement given by ADC indicating that they're dealing with other issues at the moment, or they're dealing with people being resigned or fired, or so have it. And then there's also, on the other end, where the gala has been stopped because of protests. Now, what's going on exactly?
That's another good question to ask the ADC board, because, as usual, they don't give a clear statement.
Now, have there been protests?
There was a large protest planned outside the event. In addition to that, many people, many concerned people, reached out to invitees and speakers, and it seems that the event wasn't moving forward the way that ADC wanted it to move forward. For example, the keynote speakers were kept on dropping out and apologizing. Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! Was supposed to speak at the event, and then once she appears to have learned about the sexual harassment scandal, she dropped out and she changed her mind. ADC invited someone else, and it seems that person as well dropped, canceled after they announced their name. So it was a mess. From my information, even people who were invited to be to the event as awardees, to get an award from ADC, refused to attend because, as I said, the mismanagement of this scandal have caused the organization a lot. The organization's name has become a liability, and many people do not want to be associated with ADC anymore because of what this leadership has done to the organization. So I think they reached to a point where they took the decision. I'm not sure why, though. That is another question that they should be asked. If they can't pull off an event like that, they should just resign and give the leadership of the organization to people who are capable of really running the organization and healing the community that has been hurt because of the actions of ADC's leadership.
Mm-hmm. Now, Raed, I know you mentioned that any individuals that are interested in helping out, they could go to www.reformadc.org. But how else can people get involved with the said reform?
Well, there are so many different ways. I like the reformadc.org website because it's an open forum. People can submit blog postings to the forum. They can put their ideas there. They can contact the board of directors. It's the only place out there to contact the board of directors. So it's shedding some light on facts. It's a place where people are sending their ideas. There is some positive energy coming from there. But ADC members and members of the Arab community don't need a messenger to reach to ADC. They can pick up the phone and call the organization. If they are members, they have membership rights. According to the ADC bylaws, members can submit official complaints against the board, and the board should get back to them with an answer. One of the ironies of how the lack of transparency of ADC, there is no copy of the bylaws of the organization on adc.org, so you can't really tell what your rights are. Okay. But there is a copy of the bylaws on reformadc.org if your members are interested in checking that out. But overall, again, I think that a lot of what I said is inside baseball. There is so many inside players to the organization. If there is a one takeaway point here, the takeaway point is that Arab Americans need an organization to protect them and work on their civil rights. And currently, ADC is not that organization. So we have to fix it ASAP because ADC has turned into a part of the problem rather than being a part of the solution.
Definitely. And I want to mention that Yahala Voice did reach out to ADC to try to have someone speak on their behalf to represent them during this interview. However, with the several calls that we have left and voicemails and emails, we have not gotten anything back from them. So that's the reason why we do not have their end. We really hoped that they would have reached out or at least have been given a representation for ADC, but that they lack that. So I do want to make that clear. Now, Raed, it was a pleasure speaking with you, and it was a pleasure for you to be with us today and shed light on the issue that is occurring within ADC and your personal situation as well.
Thank you so much, and I hope your audiences will consider going to reformadc.org, and they can reach to me. I'm on Twitter at Raed Jarrar, RAED JARRAR.
Great. Thank you so much, Raed. Once more, with Raed Jarrar, former National Communications Director at ADC. After the break, we will have Nadine Neighbor, an associate professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago, who has collaborated and conducted various research with members at ADC.
علي صوتك مع صوت ياهلا.
مين عنده 0% انترست ولمدة 84 شهر؟ مان كارز كرايسلر جيب تقسيط ل 84 شهر وبدون فائدة، زيرو فائدة، زيرو زب، صفر، nothing ولا شيء. مان كارز عنده 800 سيارة جديدة، كرايسلر جيب دوج رام تراكس، 18 سنة أو أكبر بغض النظر عن الكريدت، كل واحد رح يصير عنده سيارة. 250 سيارة مستعملة، بس انت نقي واختار. اشتري سيارتك من واحد بيحكي لغتك، عمران العساف وحمزة القواسمي بانتظارك في مان كاريز 4630 West 95th Street in Oakland. 708-423-0910 mancari.com.
Life means fresh. Chicago Live Poultry. You've come to the right spot. Chicago Live Poultry has live chickens, roosters, ducks, turkeys, and much more. All 100% Zabiha Halal while you wait. Chicago Live Poultry is located on Western Avenue near Devon Avenue in Chicago, next to Devon Bank. Call us at 773-381-1000 or visit our website at www.freshchickens.com. Nobody does it fresher than us.
منتجات زياد، من عائلتنا إلى عائلتكم. أفضل المنتجات الغذائية نوفرها لموائدكم. متطلبات المطبخ العربي نقدمها لكم من خلال ماركاتنا: السلطان، كرافت، نستلي، بوك، ريفل بيكان، دانا. ستجدونها في كافة المحلات والبقاليات. للمزيد من المعلومات زوروا موقعنا زياد.com. منتجات زياد، من عائلتنا إلى عائلتكم.
Do you want your company, product, or service to reach listeners in the U.S. and all over the world? Now you can. Advertise with the one and only 24/7 live Arab American station in the Midwest. Advertise with Yahala Voice. For more information, visit our website at www.yahalavoice.com or contact us at 708-321-1313. Again, that's 708-321-1313.
عم تسمع ياهلا Voice من شيكاغو.
And we're back on Yahala Voice with an exclusive coverage on the ADC controversy. You can listen to us at www.yahalavoice.com. Before the break, I mentioned that we will be speaking with Nadine Neighbor, an associate professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago, who has collaborated and conducted various research with members at ADC. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, Nadine.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for your great work.
The pleasure's ours. Now, Nadine, I want you to shed light on where ADC went wrong with the sexual harassment allegation.
Well, the case goes back, for many years. In 2007, 5 women employees had already come forward with affidavits documenting sexual harassment by Hamed. So the national office's response to this is the first step where they went wrong. They dismissed the claims, and all they did was suggest that Hamed attend an anti-sexual harassment course. And right there, the ADC national office should have been really extremely concerned that a director of a civil rights organization is a perpetrator of sexual harassment against his employees. And at that time, there were many different things that they could have done. They could have taken measures to ensure that these behaviors would not continue. He also should have been held accountable for his actions. And if you're interested, you could ask me more about what I mean by that. And even, equally important, which often gets lost in this discussion, is that support and an apology should have been made to the women who experienced the harassment, and also measures should have been set up to support them. For women who experience sexual harassment, your life can be tremendously impacted, and it just to send someone to a training and give them a certificate where they get a certificate when they're done really doesn't send a message to the community, to the women workers, saying that ADC basically is insisting.
Now, is this a normal
we will hold perpetrators accountable?
Is this normal to just have someone go to a training and get a certificate that they went to training? Is that sufficient?
It's not sufficient, because what it fails to do is hold a perpetrator accountable. A training basically teaches you, is basically a training that teaches you what sexual harassment is and how to make sure it doesn't happen, but it doesn't do anything to hold the perpetrator accountable, like maybe giving them suspension from their job or having them step down from their position. So it's as if you committed a crime and then you didn't have any repercussion after.
So they did.
But it's not only that. It's not only about the individual. It's also about the entire environment at the organization. How does that ensure that ADC will be a place where that absolutely has no tolerance for sexual harassment after the situation? And what about the women who experience the harassment? What does that do for them after what they've been through?
Definitely. Now, going back to what you were indicating about the 2007 allegation with regards to Imad being held accountable or going through this training. Now, what does that say that they didn't do anything? No.
Well, it basically says that they're trying to avoid making this a more public issue and take a larger stance on it. And basically, what it does is it basically says to people who experience sexual harassment or violence in our community that you will not be supported. That if you are a victim or survivor of sexual harassment, no one will support you. Your main civil rights organization will turn their back on you. And it sends a message, more importantly, to harassers that they will be allowed to get away with this. So it's really extremely dangerous because it has a very massive impact on our communities. It keeps gender violence in place as opposed to putting measures in place to make sure it doesn't happen to especially our young men and women who, might be coming into organizations like this.
Definitely. Now,
it's basically teaching young people that you can be a person who perpetrates gender violence and you can get away with it.
Now, Nadine, you've mentioned to me that you know some of the women that were sexually harassed by Imad. What made some of them stay quiet?
Well, they actually didn't stay quiet. They came forward in 2007, and then they came forward again more recently after they watched it happen, and they realized that if they don't speak up, then this is going to happen to other women.
Now, in 2007, were there any women that did resign or quit or were fired because of these allegations?
I not that I know of. There might be. I do not know the answer to that question.
Now, ADC has kept Imad's situation quiet.
And actually, I can just answer your question a little more. That it's not necessarily that the fact that it may have taken some years for this to become more public or for the women to take a more public stance on it. That's actually quite standard when it comes to how sexual harassment works. In the United States today, 72% of sexual abuse cases go unreported to law enforcement. That was in 2012. 70% of sexual abuse cases went unreported, 72%. And I'm just saying that number because that's basically how patriarchy works. When there is gender violence, women who do speak up, and it's not just Arab women or Arab American women, women who do speak up face great repercussions. Your reputation can be ruined. You might not get a job in the future. people often blame the women for the violence. In the Arab American community, there were individuals in our own community who called some of these women whores, and name calling and basically blaming the victim. So it takes a lot to really speak up, because you know that there will be a backlash against you.
Now,
people either won't believe your story,
definitely,
or they'll tarnish your reputation.
Now, as reported, ADC fired the former President Warren David and former communications director Jarrar just because they disagreed with the handling of the sexual harassment allegation. Now, when the committee does that, how vulnerable is everyone else in the committee being? Are they looked at as, they might be fired any day now? Or, the credibility of the committee goes down.
The committee?
The ADC,
the board.
Correct.
Or the office. Yes, exactly. Basically, this is, again, an example of punishing people who speak up and are supporters of efforts to end sexual harassment. When people who speak up against sexual harassment are punished, what that does is it basically doesn't only tell women that you will not be supported, but it also quells or crushes. It sends a message that to people that you also will pay a price if you are an ally to efforts to end gender violence. So it's really extremely damaging that it's not only the women who are experiencing the backlash, it's not only Imad Hamad who's getting away with it, but people who are trying to be allies on this issue and work to end sexual harassment are also receiving actions and a message that they too will be crushed.
Now, Nadine, why don't you shed light on what ADC could have done differently than what they've done?
Sure. I think there are several things that ADC could have done differently. I think the first thing is which we discussed, they should have taken stronger measures to ensure that sexual harassment won't happen again. And because they didn't do that, sexual harassment continued to happen. And so in 2013, once the reports came out and it became extremely clear, and the women came forward, several women who came forward in 2013, again, they didn't take strong enough measures, and in fact, they tried to cover it up. So I think what they should have done overall is hold the perpetrator accountable, create a system for support for the women who experienced the harassment, apologize to them, and actually I think they should be the center of all the efforts. As opposed to turning our backs on them and basically what I would call, I would say that our Arab American Civil Rights Organization basically really turned their back on the women who experienced the harassment. And then another thing that should have happened is the results of the investigation. An investigation was done in 2013, and ADC has not released the results of the investigation. And so there are many other women who have not come forward, but we still don't even have data or information on the extent of the harassment. And from my understanding from speaking to women who were harassed, the stories and the forms of harassment that took place were extremely egregious. They weren't only harassment of women employees. One case, at least, that I know of is a woman who walked into ADC to report an experience of discrimination, and IMAD harassed her. So exposing the results of the investigation is crucial.
So it's not only individuals within ADC that are being harassed, but it's also clients.
Harassed. Exactly. And if you think about it, we have an institution that's supposed to be there for people to come in and report discrimination. And if imagine you come in to report discrimination and you yourself are discriminated against. And then I think a larger a larger issue in our community around this that ADC, as a civil rights organization, should be able to do is to create a new model or a new structure for ending sexual violence and gender violence. So what I mean by that is it is actually pretty challenging for our community to respond to such scandals because there's already so much anti-Arab racism that paints Arab men as, you know, violent and extremely oppressive towards women. Mm-hmm. And so what we need to be able to say we're not going to be afraid to talk publicly about gender violence when it happens. We're not going to be afraid that it's going to reinforce the already existing anti-Arab racism. And we need to be fighting against racism and sexism at the same time.
Definitely.
So when we fight against sexism, we also have to take a stance against the racism and the Islamophobia. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's another thing that ADC could have done is created that model and been a leader and at the forefront of being an organization that really understands the complexity of how discrimination works on all levels.
Definitely would make the organization more reputable if they had done that.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Now, when I was speaking with Ra'ed, he indicated that anyone interested in learning more or helping out with the reform could go to www.reformadc.org. Is there anything else specific that you would like to let our listeners know that they could do to help it out in this case?
Well, I think that that the grassroots Arab American community needs to be extremely active in holding ADC accountable. In other words, we need to insist that measures are taken to fix the past problems and also work towards a better future. So some of the things people can do is keep challenging ADC on the general structural issues in the organization currently. For instance, you mentioned that several people who were working to end working in support of the women who were harassed were fired. So we need to demand that those people's positions are restored. We also need to fight to change the leadership because clearly the current leadership is acting in ways that are corrupt. They're not actually they're not being accountable to Arab American individuals, even when they recently were holding a secret meeting in Michigan with the new ADC after Ahmad retired, which is actually another can of worms, the story of his retirement. I think we can talk about that if you like. But I think that people need to be really active and not be silent and not sit back and wait for something to happen, but we need to actually challenge ADC currently and insist that the current leadership step down and make room for people who are going to run this organization in a more democratic way and in a way that can be committed to equality and justice for all Arab Americans and not just a few.
Definitely. I definitely agree with you, Nadine, and I would like to thank you for being with us and shedding light on the handling of the sexual harassment within ADC.
Thank you so much.
Once more, we were
we were talking about all the different things that happened, and I think we should actually speak up about the final piece in this story, which was that ADC National allowed Ahmad Hamid to retire.
Yes.
And then they placed a woman in the position that he had. And I think that they were attempting to be really slick in their move. But I think that the ultimate blow was that they allowed him to retire. I think that just was the cherry on the cake.
Definitely, Ra'ed did touch on that. Yeah. It's actually shocking to know that individuals that are standing up against allegations that are fair to stand up against are being fired, and an individual that is part of the allegation, the sexual harassment allegation, is actually being able to retire and being recognized for his services. So it's just an interesting type of setting that people are taking a look at, and it's mind-boggling. Many people are shocked by it. So, but I definitely did touch on that, and I do encourage all of our listeners to go to adc.org as well as www.reformadc.org to know more about the topic.
I really appreciate your work on this too.
It's my pleasure, Nadine, and unfortunately that's my time. So I would like to thank you. Thank you for being on the show with me. and
Thank you
hopefully
so much.
we could have a follow-up.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Once more,
Bye.
we were with Nadine Naber, an associate professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago.